Hello everyone, this is Ken Duong from Duong Global. We've done a collaborative project with the MoonBoy Capital Ventures. In this episode, we will talk about real estate in Vietnam, how to live and what the costs are in living in Vietnam, and other issues that expats will have in Vietnam. So first of all, I'd like to apologize for the audio issues, but I hope you enjoy the content of the podcast.
This is the Mooncast.
So guys, I have one of the, or if not the biggest real estate agent in Vietnam, Mr. Ken Duong. Am I pronouncing that right?
Yes, Ken Duong. Thank you very much.
Ken Duong. Yeah, you look very, very well dressed today. So I appreciate you coming on, and I have a bunch of questions to talk to you about in regards to Vietnam, the cost of living. I have clients that have been calling me up and stuff, asking me about how they can get to Vietnam, how they can invest into Vietnam. So I wanted to ask you personally, as what I consider the top industry leader in Vietnam. So I wanted to ask you, the first question I wanted to ask you was the pricing in Vietnam. Like, where does it vary more? You know, I know the capital is Ho Chi Minh, if I'm pronouncing that right, and versus the beach side. So where would you say the best areas are to invest in Vietnam, the beach side versus more of the center of Vietnam in Ho Chi Minh? And where would you advise people to look for to invest specifically?
Okay, great. Thank you very much for the question. And well, it really depends on, you got to look at price per square meters. So for a lot of us American viewers, you got to convert the price per square feet to price per square meter. It's really 9 times, right? It's 3 squared, but you gotta, so we just do 10 times, just very easy, simple 10 times. So if you're a 2,000 square feet, just say 200 square meter, or vice versa. And then talking about the price per square meter in Vietnam. If you're looking at, and it varies quite a bit, because Vietnam doesn't have a full, robust, multiple listing service, similar to the US MLS. So therefore, you can have 2 apartments right next to each other, and there's a big variation in the pricing. Also, if you have 2 houses that are next to each other, they can also ask for different prices just because it's all over the board. So, I mean, I would just generally answer the question for you regarding price per square meter. Where would it be best to invest? Either the city, the mountains, or the beaches. And then it will really depend on everybody. So I'll give really general advice for the audience. So if you're looking at the big cities, Ho Chi Minh City, what we call Tier 1 cities, Ho Chi Minh City, Hanoi, Da Nang, and Cần Thơ, then you are really looking at what we call central CBD area, which can go up to about 500 million VND, which is about 22,000 US dollars per square meter.
Got it.
Then at the further out you go, average pricing, you were looking at about 5,000 as you go about 7 to 10 kilometers out, 5,000 per square meter. And then you can go into kind of low to medium end, roughly about 2,500 per square meter.
Got it.
Right.
And
Yeah.
go ahead. Sorry. Is that all you got for that?
Yeah, just for the main city. But if we're going to go into the countryside and then talking about land, apartments, I mean, all the different real estate classes will have very distinct costs for them. It's quite a diversified portfolio. Condo-tels versus office-tels, timeshare or no timeshare, agricultural lands. I mean, it's pretty detailed, so I'm trying to get generally for you. If, let's say, a expat coming to Vietnam and you wanted to buy a property in one of the Tier 1 cities, I would say you're looking at probably about average of $5,000 per square meter. And you're looking at an average 2-bedroom apartment, about 80 square meters. Putting in the 500, so you look at about 400,000 US dollars. for any CBD main area, and then you're looking at probably about 200,000 US dollars to be spent on low to medium apartments.
Okay.
And of course, there are houses that are $15 million as well. And then in Hanoi is very, very expensive per square meter, even more so than Ho Chi Minh City. Da Nang is a little bit cheaper if you're looking at kind of purely the residential class of properties. Of course, when you go to second tiers or third tier cities, and then the beaches as well, such as Vũng Tàu, Nha Trang, and then further south to the Mekong Delta, you can get much, much better pricing. You can buy a whole piece of land for $100,000.
Wow. Okay.
Yeah.
How big would the land be for the $100,000 estimated around?
If you go really, really far out, you can probably get about 1,000 square meters, about 10,000 square feet.
Okay, that's really, really cool.
Yeah. So that's quite sizable.
Okay. And in regards to, so I just wanted to ask you in regards to the restrictions on foreigners when trying to buy properties, does it depend on where you're coming from? Like, for instance, my audience is mainly US, so I want to focus maybe on US and Europe. So these cohorts specifically, could you talk to how would the process be in regards to acquiring real estate and what sort of bottlenecks that they could potentially face in regards to acquiring real estate?
Okay. So in 2017, the July 1st, 2017, Vietnam came out with a new real estate law allowing owners to have limited ownership of properties in Vietnam. And the law continues to change for the better. But in 2017, the law generally is foreigners are permitted to buy properties not attached to the land, which means they can do apartments, they can do condos. Those are the two main ones. They can't own the land. So Vietnam is constructive ownership by the Vietnamese government of all land. So you can't buy what we call in the States a single family dwelling. In Vietnam, it's called a villa, which is a house attached to the land itself. Foreigners cannot own, right? But they can own apartments and condos. Within that ownership, there's actually quota restrictions for foreign ownership as well. Generally, within a province, a city, or a project itself, the general quota is 30% allocated for foreign ownership, and the rest will go to local Vietnamese. And that's really just to protect the local market. Generally, that is the rule on foreigners owning property in Vietnam.
So when you talk about the 30% ownership to the Vietnamese, that's for the single family homes and standalone homes, right? Specifically?
No, that's all classes. Residential, commercial, that is all real property classes own 30% limit quota for foreign ownership. The land itself, no foreigners can own any land in Vietnam under the current law.
Okay, so how does that work if I buy a property and 30% is given in terms of equity to then a Vietnamese person? Is it a random person, or do I choose that person, or how does that work actually?
Oh no, to make a specific correction, it's not 30% equity, it's 30% of the project. For example, if the apartment building has 100, it's not partial ownership required. If let's say the development has 100 units, you can only sell 30 units to foreigners, 70 units to local. It's not that every project is required, you have to have local ownership.
Got it. Okay, it makes sense. And you said, so for apartments, no issues at all, but for the single family home, you can own the home, but just not the land specifically, right?
Yes, that is. Actually, they won't allow you to sell you the home separately because it's mostly attached to the land. So anything attached to the land, you cannot own as a foreigner.
Wow. Okay. And in regards to the process of purchasing a home as a foreigner, how does that look like? Say, for instance, me, I'm American. I want to buy Vietnamese real estate. I don't have a residency. I don't know exactly about the legal requirements. How would I, step by step, can you just walk me through that process of how I would be able to purchase a home safely and without being scammed or anything like that?
Sure, sure. The great thing is that the real estate market in Vietnam is developing very rapidly, and you have the large real estate companies in Vietnam, such as CBRE, Cushman and Wakefield, Avison Young, and JLL. So there are many large companies that in real estate that will help foreigners understand the whole process. So you'll feel safe that you can purchase a home under the foreign quota. But I'll tell you generally the process is, and Vietnam's slightly different. Vietnam's called a pre-build market, whereby you buy off-grid in the construction phase, whereas in the United States, like 90% of all the purchases are post-build.
Yes.
So what the procedures you would go through is, one is you would start working with an agent under a brokerage to identify properties that you would like. And once you identify the property, then you would if it's a new construction, there's going to be a payment schedule anywhere from 2 years to 5 years. Because for the most part, foreigners cannot get loans in Vietnam, but we do have a strategic partner that allows you to. I'll talk about that later. But foreigners cannot get loans in Vietnam. So you're looking at payment schedules of 24 months to 60 months, right? And it'll be a percentage deposit. Then each month you pay 5% or 10% of the total. And then after X amount of percent, you can actually move into the home if it's not built yet, or if it's already built. And then afterwards, you continue to make the payments under what is called a purchase and sale agreement.
Mm-hmm.
You don't get a grant deed yet because that hasn't come out yet. And then when you paid up to X amount of percent, usually it's about 60 to 80%, you will get a handover procedure where they will hand over the pink book. It's called the pink book, which is what we call a grant deed in the United States. Land is a red book. So you would get the pink book, and then you pay the rest of your 20% to register with the local authorities under your foreign ownership, and then you would have full rights to the house, or the apartment or the condo. And the specific regulation is foreigners can have a 50-year lease with a renewal of 50 years, which is 99 years. That is sufficient for 99.99% of people's lives in their lifetime. So it shouldn't be an issue. And therefore we treat it kind of like in perpetuity of your ownership of that particular property.
Yeah. Won't be an issue unless Elon solves aging or something, right?
Yes.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. So in regards to the tax implications, how does that work? So say, for instance, let's make a very simple example. I have $100,000 and I want to buy Vietnamese real estate. Who's getting their cut from that $100,000, and what's the upcharge there? What's the actual final price? Because you always know there's those hidden fees, the commissions, whatever that you got to pay. So what am I actually looking at? Even if the pricing says $100,000, what's the actual end price? What's the markup? Is it 10%, 15% on top? What am I looking at in regards to that for the final sale?
Okay, great. So as a buyer coming into the market, especially a foreign buyer, they will usually the markup on the price is about 10% higher than what they would charge a local to buy the property. So you look at 100 to 110,000. The seller agent or the seller will pay all the commission, and the closing cost is negotiated between the parties. But typically, when they sell to foreigners, they'll do what is called a net sale. That means that the seller already has paid for the capital gains, paid for the taxes, and paid for all the closing costs. So then you just pay one chunk, knowing that that's the net of your purchase price. So that's from the standpoint of when you're a buyer. And then for items that are specifically for Americans, because as an American attorney, very familiar with taxes, then I will address specific differences for Americans buying properties abroad, capital gains tax, and international taxation. And I will try to address that for your audience as appropriate.
Yeah.
Back to that question is 100,000. If the seller pays for all the costs, all the capital gains, then you would really just pay exactly about 100,000, give or take 1,000 or two, and you don't have to pay the buyer agent at all. You don't have to pay the closing costs. You don't have to pay the notary or the registration. it'll all be taken care of for the seller by the seller. And that's kind of really our experience here in Vietnam with foreign buyers. And that's how it's been working very well.
Okay, and in regards to the annualized property tax, what is that percentage in Vietnam, or does it not exist? What's the annualized property tax for foreigners?
So great, as of right now, Vietnam doesn't have a property tax based on assessed value or market value in Vietnam. However, there are discussions in the last 2 years or so that potentially there will be a property tax based on assessed value. But as of right now, maybe it's a great time to buy where there's no property tax to maintain your property.
Mm-hmm. Okay. And what would you say the current state of the market is right now? Like I'm not exactly following the trends. I know you are. Is it a good time to buy? Are we in a downtrend, an uptrend? What is it looking like currently in Vietnam?
So Vietnam went through a very large real estate crisis or crunch, which impacted the credit crunch, very similar to our 2009 real estate bubble burst in the United States. Slightly different. I can't go into all the nuances, but generally it's very difficult in the last 24 months for any person or company to borrow related to real estate, such as getting a mortgage or getting funds for development or building is very, very difficult due to the closures of some very large real estate development companies in Vietnam. Thus, the banks have froze on the release of funds for real estate, thus impacting a lot of individuals who can't get loans. Not the foreigners, because they can't get loans anyway. But right now in the real estate market for the last 24 months is kind of a freeze. There's been a lot of foreclosures or banks taking back properties, but the banks have not found a way to release them or create tapes like the United States. And even if they did, there's just no one locally that has enough money to buy at any large volume, similar to what happened with Bank of America or Wells Fargo, where they were selling billion-dollar tapes. So Vietnam doesn't have that system in place to protect. Thus, only foreign money can come in order to buy. So right now, foreign funds and also individuals are looking to buy up cheaper properties here in Vietnam. But the real estate prices have not corrected themselves because Vietnam has always been a speculative market, right? So it's investors buying from investors. So therefore the correction in the pricing hasn't hit yet. Therefore the prices still have been maintained. But I believe in the next 12 months or so, based on different predictions, that it will start to go down and that you will be able to find deals, especially in the residential market class, to find better deals to buy in Vietnam. Which is what leads to the opportunities for your audience is, so we partner and work with a startup company, they're about 6 years old, called Homebase. And Homebase is a Singaporean-based company. They're a Y Combinator, they've been funded, and they pretty much structure loans for foreigners to access real property in Vietnam, similar to private banking in the United States, right? But they've created a system in order for you to buy properties in Vietnam as a foreigner with no credit or anything in Vietnam. And in essence, it's a joint venture between Homebase and the foreign buyer. And you pay monthly, similar to a premium, and then you pay interest on top, and there's a full calculation. So there are options right now. If your audience is interested, we have an affiliate program with Homebase, and we work with them. Then we can help you structure the legal side, understanding what the terms are and the payment terms and reviewing of your loan agreements and your promissory notes.
Awesome. Can you walk me through a little bit of the vetting process in regards to that? Let's say, for instance, I have a client and they want to partake in that particular service. How would they be vetted in regards to credit scores, things of this nature?
So to be perfectly honest with you, because the real collateral is the actual property itself that you plan to buy. So the higher your deposit amount is, their minimum deposit is $35,000. but they got to look at the asset class to determine whether 50% is necessary, and then they adjust the interest rates. So they don't really look at. So I've filled out the form. I've worked with them, and they have questions like, "What is your monthly salary?" They can't verify your credit score abroad anyway, and they mostly look at the asset class itself and the property to see what is the resale risk and the foreclosure risk to determine if you can qualify. To be on the very safe side, if you deposit more than 50% of the property, then most likely you'll be able to get the loan.
Got it. Easy.
Right.
And
you don't want to lose 50% of your money,
yeah, exactly. Yeah. So in regards to the mortgage rates that they're usually offering, is it usually somewhere favorable, somewhere reasonable, usually from your experience and what you've seen?
No. So they're ridiculous here in Vietnam. In the United States, I believe it's about 6% right now, which is considered extremely high. It will recorrect, hopefully back to the golden days of 3.75 or 4.25. But Vietnam, at the lowest, is 8%. Right now, it's even hovering around 12% per year on a 15-year or 30-year. It's ridiculous. So don't even think about interest rates here in Vietnam. And then the home base actually charges about 1 to 2 basis points higher, which in the US we would call it like usury law violations of high interest rates.
Yeah. Yeah, loan sharking and so on,
Yeah, so you really got to make sure that the purpose of buying, it's actually much better. I advise many of my clients in the States to do a HELOC or a reverse mortgage in the United States based on the lower interest, and you can refinance and use that money to buy a property in Vietnam. Would make a lot more sense than to try to get a loan as a foreigner here in Vietnam, and then eventually sell the property in the United States and then fully pay off the loan in the U.S.
Perfect. And in regards to immigration, right? So I'm American. I'm trying to get over to Vietnam to stay there with the property that I then bought or want to buy. How does that process work in terms of immigration? Is there long-term residency? Do I have to keep doing it every single year, or is it the 5-year, 10-year? Can I eventually get a passport? How does it work exactly?
Okay, great question. Yeah, so I'll break it down into short term. So Vietnam, I say short term is 90 days, to midterm, which is 1 year, and long term would be 5 years and above, and then in perpetuity. So the short term right now, as Americans and countries around the world, there's a 90-day e-visa, which allows for you multiple entry e-visa into Vietnam. That's a short term. There's a super short term, which is a 30-day single entry visa as well, for any foreigners coming into Vietnam. That's a short term. If you're looking at a more midterm approach, is a 1 year period. So that one has a few options. The first option is called DT4 investor visa, which is you invest up to 3 billion VND. Based on the current exchange rate, it's roughly about 130,000 US dollars in order to open a business in Vietnam. And then you will have that visa 1 year multiple entry, renewable every year.
Okay.
And that investor visa goes all the way up to investment of $5 million. And that allows you a 5 or even a 10-year residence card. So the more that you invest, the longer period that you can stay.
And is the process rigorous in regards to paperwork and things of this nature? And do they have like some kind of ways in which you can bypass that particular business stuff? Maybe you can do some kind of pensioner type of situation, or if you have some kind of passive income coming in that you can show proof of. Is it only foreign direct investment?
Yeah. So before I go into that regarding retirement visas or the investment, there are 2 other ways regarding investment for you to stay longer term. One is you open the company and you act as the legal representative of the company. Then you will be permitted to go in and out on a 2 or 3 year basis at a time. So that requires you to invest into Vietnam. 2 is if you actually work for a company as a foreigner, then if you have an employment contract as an expert, then you can get a work permit that will go for 2 to 3 years depending on your employment status. And to go back to what you're talking about, I think you're referring to the retirement visa.
Yes.
Right. Unfortunately, Vietnam currently does not have a retirement visa like the Thai Elite program or the Malaysia program or Singapore. Currently, they don't have that program right now. It's not available. I hope it will be available in the future because many of our audience are retirees who just want to chill on the beach, maybe open up a small coffee shop or something. And that's what they have to do now. They use the DT4 investor visa program and they invest into a coffee shop or a restaurant or something that just runs itself and then they renew every year. That's how they kind of staying in Vietnam.
Hey bro, I'm Just Trolling is something that will not just challenge your perspective, but also touch your heart and soul. It's a book that defies convention, blending art and literature into a thought-provoking masterpiece. A reflective piece of provocative art that tackles societal constructs from angles you've never considered. Hey bro, I'm Just Trolling delves into the very essence of our existence. It questions the technology that surrounds us, challenges our notions of beauty, stares unflinchingly into the eyes of death, and questions the boundaries of freedom. It scrutinized the educational system that molds our very future. This book is a journey, an exploration of shared human experience, and it's a work of art that refuses to be confined by tradition. It's a canvas painted with words, a melody of thought, and a testament to the power of creativity in a world dominated by algorithms and data. Visit MoonBoyCapitalVentures.com and get your hands on Hey Bro, I'm Just Trolling today. It's not just a book, it's a movement. Now let's jump back into the show.
In regards to the strategies you would suggest when investing in Vietnam, would you prefer or do you suggest the Airbnb strategy or more so because if someone's trying to actually generate yield, and what does the yield percentages look like on an annualized basis that you would be looking at to get? Is it deferred depending on if you're in a major city like Ho Chi Minh versus somewhere else more in the outskirts and rural areas? Can you just a little bit break that down in regards to investing in real estate as a generating yield for generation of yield?
Okay. So, I mean, in full honesty and disclaimer to you and your audience, I do real estate law and I do advising on taxation, but I don't actually do the day-to-day real estate work aside from representing my clients. So I will give a perspective on the more macro numbers rather than the specific numbers of how much you can make from Airbnb as opposed to renting in the cities, because that's really a role of a real estate agent or brokerage that handles that every day.
Okay.
So hopefully you just take it with a grain of salt. I am an attorney, not a real estate agent, but I do have relative knowledge. However, in the future, of course, we work with different agents that can give you, minute by minute, play by play information as well.
Okay.
So generally, let's compare. Let's say you buy a property and then renting it, as opposed to you do Airbnb. You rent a property and you Airbnb it. What are the potential returns? And if you rent or if you buy a property based as a foreigner with little to no leverage, 50% or zero leverage, you will not even be able to cover the rent or your mortgage payments. If you're looking at less than the 2% yield, so you can't even cover your interest in principal. So it doesn't make sense that you buy a property and rent it out.
Yeah.
Okay. The other option is you rent a property and then you fix it up and then you rent it long term, not Airbnb short term. But to be honest, that one also, so the rental price is actually relatively inexpensive, but it depends on your operating abilities to lower your cost. But even if you run it well, you're looking at roughly about a 4 to 6% return on investment for renting a property and then renting it out long term, 1 year at a time.
Got it. So it's probably not the best place in regards to investment properties, more so for lifestyle.
Lifestyle, yeah. However, with Airbnb, I mean, I have a very solid client that's been educating me a lot. He has a channel too, Jita. He had about 700 Airbnb properties in the United States, running on some very good numbers and good EBITDA. And then I think he just did 2 properties in Ho Chi Minh City as his test subjects. I think a total of about 26 to 30 units. He's expecting roughly, and we've seen in the market, roughly about 6 to 10%, return on investment based on renting the whole building and then fixing it up a little bit and then renting an amount as Airbnb for dailies or weeklies. So that one still has a pretty decent return. But I would preface it with someone with a substantial knowledge and experience, someone has a really good system in place and understands the cost savings in having a staging company and know where to buy the furniture. So I think achieving 8 to 10% return is an experienced Airbnb operator. I think it would take a new operator. I would say they would only make about 4 to 6%, similar to the one who rents long term.
Do you know anything in regards to REITs, real estate investment trust?
Yep, I do.
How does that work there specifically? As a foreigner, could I do that type of option? Is that something that's available to as well?
Yeah, so there's some large hedge funds or managed funds in Vietnam, such as Vina Capital, Dragon Capital, Mekong Capital, and some of the other companies. They have REIT options to allow for foreigners to directly invest into a REIT in Vietnam. Similar, they'll give you a fixed return, preferred or non-preferred dividends, and then they just manage your portfolio. It hasn't gotten to the level similar to the United States where you have like medical REITs, and then you have social housing REITs. You have a very specific class for REITs. Yeah. It's more generally portfolio, mostly resorts, and then apartments or residential buildings. It hasn't gone to that subclass of REITs that give X amount of returns, because REITs are very new in Vietnam.
Yeah. Okay, perfect. And in regards to when I want to buy a property in Vietnam, what currency do I have to use to buy the property in? Can it be crypto? Can it be dollars? Can it be euros? Or does it have to be the Vietnamese national currency?
No, so you can actually, well, specifically if you buy from a developer, most likely they'll need you to convert your foreign currency into Vietnamese dong before transferring, because the payment schedule is based on local Vietnamese currency, the Vietnamese dong. But if you buy from another seller, which is a peer-to-peer sale, they can accept cash, they can accept US dollars, euros, or any currency that you both agree upon. That's a private party agreement.
Okay, so it can be also crypto?
So to be honest with you, I don't have the daily information on that. But I know there are companies, real estate companies, trying to do NFTs and also to sell properties based on NFTs. But I have not seen a sale specifically with crypto for real property. I've seen it for non-real property, like a laptop or a car or a phone. I've seen them do crypto purchase and sales, but the large ones like real estate, I haven't seen yet.
Yeah, how difficult it is to open a bank account in Vietnam because I'm guessing you would have to use a local currency while you're there, right? So how difficult would it be as a foreigner to open up a local bank account and to deploy capital?
I would want to say specifically Americans is one of the most difficult to open up a bank account in Vietnam right now. I've been here for 10 years, so I've seen the laws change, and also the application of the law. So Americans, due to the Foreign Bank Account Reporting Act, and also the Foreign Corrupt Practices Act. If you're an American, you come into the bank, then they will, most likely reject you. But if they do receive you, then you need to show some documentation. One is you have to show you have a valid visa that you've entered Vietnam. 2 is you show your passport. 3 is you actually have to show either you have a work permit or a residence card in order to open the bank account as an American. And then you can only, so based on your labor contract, the denomination you receive, you can only open up the bank account in that denomination. So mostly it's Americans who be USD.
Yes.
And compound that with another issue is your account is limited. You cannot have a debit card. You cannot pay for different services. So banks have become super apps where you can pay for airline tickets, you can pay utility bills and all that. So as a foreigner, you will be limited. You can't do that. So there are tons of restrictions for foreigners after all the hoops you have to go through just to open a bank account. And being an American is the most difficult. due to those two pieces of law that I mentioned. Um, but with that said, there's some tips and tricks to open. Um, Local Vietnamese banks that are state-owned enterprises that privatize, such as Vietcom Bank, Vietin Bank, AgriBank. Yeah, so as a foreigner, once if you can open up your bank account, you can have a lot of restrictions. As an American, it's even more difficult. Even me, I look Asian, I look Vietnamese, I speak Vietnamese, but they can tell I'm not Vietnamese fully. So they'll ask, do you have a second passport? And then, I'm a lawyer, I don't lie, I say yes, and then they go, sorry, we can't help you. So that's the local state-owned banks. But then you got the Vietnamese private banks, such as Techcom Bank or VP Bank. They will, because they're not as restricted as the state-owned banks, then they would maybe open it for you. And then, of course, you also have options with international banks, such as HSBC, Citibank, Standard Chartered, UOB from Singapore that are much more open and have less restrictions for foreigners open up bank accounts in Vietnam. Nevertheless, they are all subjected to the State Bank of Vietnam regulations and the Ministry of Finance. So minimum standards set for foreigners opening up bank accounts in Vietnam. And I would say generally it's much harder now than it was 10 or 5 years ago.
Got it. So when you're going through the immigration process, and is one of the requirements for you to have a Vietnamese bank account? Because it's usually an immigration requirement. So I just wanted to know that specifically.
You have to have a stamp, and you have to have a visa. So your 90-day visa or your 30-day visa, and then you have to have a stamp showing entry, and then entry into Vietnam, and then when you exit. So you have to show that you entered legally into Vietnam. That's the first step.
I was talking more so in regards to long-term stay. When you're trying to get a long-term residency or something like that, would you have to then showcase that you have a Vietnamese bank account to be able to get a long-term residency?
No, you don't. You don't.
Okay.
Usually you have to have the long-term residency or some long-term plan before you can open the bank account.
Okay, got it.
Yep.
Okay. And in regards to the cost of living in Vietnam, what would you say it is in terms of dollar values on average? I mean, obviously it depends on your lifestyle and things of this nature, but if you're just, like, say, for instance, a retiree and you're looking to maybe potentially retire into Vietnam and your pension is maybe like, I don't know, 2,000, maybe you have, making a couple more grand from ETFs or something like that, and then you just deployed your capital into a Vietnamese real estate property, so you have no rent. What would you say the average cost of living is? Would 2K be enough? Would 4K be enough? Would 6K be enough? What would you say is the least amount of money that you need to have the highest amount of return in terms of quality of life?
Sure, great. And of course, I know my marketing team, we've done over 400 videos, and we want to address specifically what is the average or standard cost of living. And the number is $2,500 for you to live comfortably in. I would separate the two. I would say, depending on your lifestyle, our video was really addressed to digital nomads or single folks without children, right? So $2,500 per month even in the big city. You're spending roughly about $1,000 a month for rent. I would say food expenses are roughly about $500. And then you have entertainment expenses, another $500. And then the other $500 would be a safety net, rainy day fund. And that would be sufficient for a single person or a married person, a married couple that are living in Vietnam. But I would say double that amount if you are going to have children. As a foreigner, your children can't go to local schools here in Vietnam. So you're forced to put them in international schools.
Mm-hmm.
Homeschool them, I guess that's another option. I know many folks do that as well. But international schools, cheapest would be $300 a month per child, going up to anywhere $2,000 per month per child. So that's a big chunk of the cost. And then, of course, all the other, that's just tuition.
Yeah.
Right. So that's place it for a couple comfortably working and living in Vietnam, I would say $5,000 a month. And then I'll just address it because a lot of people said, hey, if I live in the countryside or if I live at the beach city, I don't need that much money. So I would preface it with the final thought of when we made our adjustments to the video is, if you were to live as a retiree in the countryside, where you don't need to buy property, you don't really need a car, you don't need to get around all the time, you can spend somewhere for about $500 a month, and you can drop your cost to about $1,500 a month, and you would live extremely comfortably in a one-bedroom near or by the beach in one of the beach cities, and your eating expenses are not that high. If you ride a motorbike, then gas is roughly about $10 a week. So you can get away with $1,500 if you live in the beach city and you don't have to go to work every day.
What would you say is the safety aspect of living in the major city versus living in the outskirts, more in the rural areas? Would you say it's the same level of safety, or what would you say is the safety overall in Vietnam actually too as well?
I'll start off with the macro numbers. So Vietnam is considered one of the safest. I believe it's top 10. We did a video on that. Compared to the United States, it's 163rd safest country in the world. So one is Vietnam doesn't have any guns. Even police don't have guns, only the military have guns. So from a safety standpoint, Vietnam in general is extremely safe against any crimes. And I always joke that the maximum serial killer can in Vietnam kill 6 people. So he stabbed like 6 people, and then he got caught. Whereas we know in the United States you can have hundreds of killings.
It's a normal Tuesday in Chicago,
Unfortunately, what happened in Israel more recently, many of our friends, you're talking about 200, 300 people, mass murders, and Vietnam just doesn't have that, which is a good thing. And I would say that in the countryside, it's even safer, extremely safe. Vietnam is 60% agrarian society. And farmers or agricultural individuals are pretty safe and pretty content with their lifestyle. I think a lot of crimes happen because people want more and they see other people having the to-do or the keeping up with the Joneses kind of thing, and poverty. But if you accept your poverty and you're happy with it, you're not going to be committing crimes. Whereas in the city, the crime rates are higher because many of the country folks that come into the city. And I was reading statistics about 2017, it might have changed, but roughly about 700,000 migrations from the countryside in here in the South in Ho Chi Minh City come to the city every year, including thousands of students. So the folks who come here, of course, you can't support it. And one interesting fact is Ho Chi Minh City has roughly about 13 million people.
Wow.
The size of Los Angeles. Actually, Los Angeles is 10 million. It's huge. It's such a big metropolitan city that many of our viewers and people around the world don't realize how densely populated Ho Chi Minh is, right? Of course, population density, you can't feed everybody. And if you're from the countryside, you're coming up, then there are more petty crimes in the cities than there are in the countryside because people are trying to make it and then they get desperate. More crimes and things like that. But I always say, as a foreigner, if you're paying $1,000 a month for rent, you're living in a pretty good place. You're in a full apartment with 24-hour security, then it's pretty safe for most foreigners that come to Vietnam. The occasional fights here at bars and things like that, but in reality, Vietnam is extremely safe. I always feel safe here. And most of our clients have never really had issues about security, even at night, with the exception of a few of the districts. But even at night, and women going around, because Vietnam never sleeps, or Ho Chi Minh City never sleeps, so you always see somebody in the streets. You will hardly ever be alone, and you don't have personal space.
Yeah, that's amazing. Okay, that's good to hear. And I have my final question for you is, again, I want to just ask you one more question about the rental income. Do you know anything in regards to the tax implications of if I were to take, for instance, the rental income route to try to generate some yield? Do you know anything in regards to that? Like, is there actual taxes that would have to pay?
Let me just ask the question just to be clear. You're talking about the relative income or salary of
No,
Vietnamese?
no. When if I, for instance, deploy capital into a real estate property and I rent it out to somebody,
Okay.
that income that I've generated, what are the taxable implications of that?
Okay, great. So the question is related to the tax of income from rental property.
Exactly.
So we have to answer as an American, right? Because the U.S. is based on worldwide taxation. Um, Anywhere income is derived around the world, you're required to report your taxes in the United States with a few exceptions. So technically, if you buy a property, you rent it out here in Vietnam, and you receive income, you are required to pay or that in the United States, because U.S. and Vietnam does not have a double tax treaty or anti-double tax, right? You would pay it based on your income in the United States based on investments. Here in Vietnam, based on the Vietnamese law, you would, if you form a company to own the property, then the company would pay taxes, corporate taxes. But if you hold it as an individual, you rent it out, there's really no way to check what your income and how much. And then many people are actually very comfortable paying in cash every single month rather than doing a transfer.
Got it. And what about if you're European? Is there a double taxation clause?
Most of the countries around the world are territorial tax or tax acquired in the country. United States is one of the exceptions. From my understanding, aside from Britain, which is already exited the EU, then the rest of the EU countries are tax only what you make in your country. But let me recheck Germany. I believe Germany is similar to the United States, where it's a worldwide tax system. But for the most part, Europeans who have income abroad will have a foreign tax exemption. And the US also has it as well. I can just address that a little bit. Is the US, if you live as a US citizen living abroad more than 11 months per year, you can claim a foreign tax exemption up to an X amount of dollars. So, and then after that, it will be taxed as ordinary income. So right now, the amount for 2023 will be 114,000 US dollars. So if you make that, then you don't have to pay US taxes. You have to show you pay taxes abroad. And then above that will be tax on your ordinary income.
Got it. Ken, this has been great, man. This is all the questions that I have, and I really appreciate you, and thank you so much for your time. Do you have any closing thoughts before we go?
Well, first of all, I want to thank you very much. My channel wasn't built in order to be a YouTuber or to do podcasts. However, since 2016 and after 400 videos, we really appreciate a lot of folks like yourself who are coming to us to give us the opportunity to, one is find alternative revenue streams, two is to increase our exposure and branding amongst other audiences that are bigger than us, and then also to provide specific legal and business value to your audience. I think our channel is quite unique in providing legal work and making it semi-interesting. It could be extremely boring.
Yeah.
I'm very proud of our small channel being one of the most active channels in Vietnam for a law firm and business consulting firm to provide value information. So, on behalf of the Yoon Global team, especially marketing, I want to say thank you to you and your audience for allowing us to share information. Hopefully it's pertinent to your audience, and hopefully you join our affiliate program as well, so that we can continue to add value to your subscribers and your followers. And if I ever get a podcast, I would love to invite you on my podcast.
Awesome, man. Awesome. Yeah, for sure, man. For sure. We'll be in touch. I might have you on again at some point too, as well. Maybe ask different type of questions and stuff. So it's been a blessing, and thank you so much for your patience and being able to come on. And where can people find you on the internet?
I'm sorry?
Where can people find you on the internet?
So, so we have our YouTube channel. which is Yoon Global Business Consulting Group. Or another easy way is we've dominated the Vietnam passports. So you just write Vietnam passport, 13 of the top 20 videos is ours. We also have our Facebook page. We have our website, of course, but the best way is probably through our email for our 4 offices around the world in California, Vietnam, Thailand, and Singapore would be contact@yoonbusinessconsulting.com would probably be the best way to connect us. And I guess one little thing is we have a TikTok channel. So the team made us a TikTok channel.
Nice.
TikTokers on there, that's fun as well.
Okay. Awesome.
Yeah. And of course, you can find me in Vietnam physically.
What'd you say? Sorry. What'd you say?
Always find me in Vietnam physically. Love to host you. I'm right here at my bar called Barcodes. It's Whiskey Cigar Lounge. We have a coffee shop and we have a spa. So I love to host you or any one of your subscribers who come to Vietnam. And
I have a couple coming your way. I'll be sending you a follow-up email about that. But yeah, and I might be coming too as well in Q2-ish next year. So I'll be sending you a follow-up email for some clients that are serious about investing in Vietnam. So, but I'll leave links down below. You'll send me the links, right? So I can leave them down below, so my audience can take a look at that and see.
Yes. So William and Kim, our marketing team, will work with you on all the links that you need, all the backlinks, and then information. Of course, the affiliate program as well. We would love to partner with you long term and service your clients.
Awesome, man. Okay, I'll see you guys in the next one, man. I hope you guys enjoyed this episode of the Mooncast, man, and peace.